Hi, thank you for joining me. This is Diane. Welcome to SFN. Today's guest is Javon Giles, and we're celebrating Black History Month all year long and highlighting our Black history in the month of February. Javon Giles was at the top of my list to say thank you. I have a number of people that I would like to thank. And if I may, Javon, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for helping us produce SFN News these number of years. I'd like to thank Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson was instrumental in me in the inception and implementation of my television shows. I'd like to thank Mayor Breed. London Breed. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors President, Shaman Walton. I'd like to thank Felicia Jones, who is the founder of Wealth and Disparities in the Black Community. I'd like to thank Karen Clopton, who is the chair of the Human Rights Commission, Dr. Davis, because she's the director of the Human Rights Commission. Sakira Smiley, she's the director of Booker T. Booker T is a whole Black history subject within itself. So we'd like to thank, she's the executive director there. And I'd also like to thank my son, the future Dr. Gregory E. Holloway, who will be the Doctor of Public Policy, God willing, in spring of next year. Now, Javon, thank you again for including me and coming on the show to celebrate Black History Month. And I'd like to turn it over to you because you had such a phenomenal idea. Folks, this is really Javon's show. We're just in this space, sharing this space. Welcome, Javon.
Hello, Diane. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what's going on?
Living the SF Commons dream.
Yeah.
Making this the best what we can with what we have for our producers. So, but speaking of doing what I can with what we have, since it's Black History Month, I sat back the first week of February thinking to myself, what's a way to talk about Black history amongst our producers, especially a producer like you, Diane, who has such a long history being in San Francisco, and as a Black woman who has done so much progressive things with the program. It's best to have you on such a platform to speak about Black history within San Francisco, not only about Black history of the past, also the present and for the future as well.
Yes, I think I want to get to the past a little later because people can just Google that. They can actually internet search. I use Google Scholar for a lot of my information. And what I'd like to talk about in the Black Lives Matter movement and what that means. And I want to, in celebrating, we have to acknowledge our history and acknowledge what has went wrong. And before I get into Black Lives Matter and specifically how it relates to gentrification, I want to say the status quo in San Francisco has not worked. It is crazy that people are still employing the old methods, the old status quo. Meanwhile, our population is disintegrating. The communities, the Black communities have disintegrated. Let me just say to qualify, I'm 69 years old, native San Franciscan. I'll be 70 this year. Grew up at 45 West Point Road, the housing projects there. Mother returned to school, but I grew up in the hood. And I love the fact that I'm from Hunters Point. It is heartbreaking to see what has been happening for the last number of years. And with regard to gentrification, which started in the 70s. So, Javon, one of the reasons I mentioned the status quo is because if we continue to do things the same way, we're getting the same results. So with speaking of doing things the same way, that's your status quo. That is what is hindering Mayor Breed from the innovative, dynamic solutions. Mayor Breed and others, and well, the Mayor Breed and others, and I'm in that club. It's hindering us because things have always been done a certain way, but that way has not worked and it has not served our purposes, as evidenced by the data that shows how many Blacks and brown people have been displaced through gentrification. During my research, under anthropological theory, and it's from the American University, Manissa Mahawawal did an article, did research actually, and I have the abstract about Black Lives Matter, gentrification, and the security state in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had never tied together the Black Lives Movement with security. And that means security of those who are threatened by people that don't look like them. In the abstract, Javon, do you just jump in? You want to?
Well, I think when you say with the status quo, it's a very much a rinse and repeat process. A lot of the things that are so-called meant to symbolize or definitely change or bringing back culture to San Francisco is very much a false ideology. I think it was Malcolm X. It was Malcolm X. I have the quote right here. He says, sorry, a little professional, gotta get my phone.
That's okay.
The white man will try to satisfy us with symbolic victories rather than economic equity and real justice, because that is very much a basic factor, the basic hindrance of what San Francisco politics is, especially for Black people. And a lot of the whole concept of, a lot of companies and organizations will say things, we hear you, we see you, that's all you're doing, you're hearing and seeing, but what are you doing?
Right.
Hearing, a lot of people think hearing and seeing is enough, but you could hear someone screams, you could see someone screams, but if you're not getting involved in it, what factors are you really playing to improve someone's life?
Right. And and when just a disclaimer, when we say the white man, we don't mean each and every white person that we see. We mean the man. And the man is who controls the system.
As a concept, yeah. And,
yes.
And
I just wanted to break down. I knew what you. Yeah.
It's like people who, if they are offended by thinking you're attacking me, then you may be the problem. So let's
let's
get that out there.
Right. We're not. Everyone wants to be comfortable and deserves to be comfortable. Every human being. And in the abstract from Manissa's from the Department of Anthropology, again at the American University, what she stated is in Black Lives Matter protests erupted around across the United States and the San Francisco Bay Area. As we know, the San Francisco Bay Area became the site of nightly demonstrations that deployed a range of disruptive practices and direct actions. The content and style of these protests reflect both the national and political issues raised by the Black Lives Matter movement and highly local and regional struggles over gentrification and displacement. In this article, she analyzes these protests in relation to the regional political economy of the tech industry, real estate booms, and the attendant eviction epidemic in the region. You mentioned, Javon, about the man. It happens to be the white man because they have everything. We need them to share with us. So this is the disparity of it all. You meant these piecemeal. We used to call them piecemeals, but they say, we see you. This is supposed to be the year of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They hear us, they see us, but they're still using the status quo to the method. There's no strategic planning.
Yeah, none. Any plan they do have is very much done with a grain of salt. I'm sure there's a lot of goodwill that goes into these meetings or these board executive decisions of what can we do to make this more inclusive. But
Right,
you look at a lot of the issues of San Francisco about where inclusion needs to be taken care of. Like, for example, homelessness. A huge population of homelessness in San Francisco are Black men, and
right,
it's something that clearly San Francisco has a stigma towards homeless people. As much as there claim to be so many practices or programs to help, where our new location now at Bayback Media, you step outside, it's a very scary scene. So it's one thing to put into paper about what's going to be done to help, but it's different when you actually walk outside and see with your own eyes.
right. You know, what do you, so you say when you walk outside, it's a very scary thing. Why? Because the majority of the Black men in San Francisco appear to be homeless.
Yeah.
But I know that's not the truth, but it's pretty close. I'm gonna do some research. Let me make a note of that.
Well, I know a lot of Black families have been driven out with gentrification. I
Right,
know there's some areas in Hunters Point and Third Street where there's a Starbucks where you would have never thought that would happen 20, 25 years ago.
right,
So clearly there's a displacement of these people who have to live way out of the Bay Area or beyond the Bay Area. And
right,
also a lot of them lose their homes, a lot of them become homeless, they lose their jobs, it becomes a downward spiral for them. And
right,
someone who could have grown up on Third Street, like Third and Blue, for example, they're homeless right now at Civic Center because they lost everything because of gentrification and other factors.
right. You know, I almost stopped there today. Periodically, I'll go there and do what I can, and just show some love. But that's right down the street. And what must happen, no, because we're in the status quo. So we are looking at the problems and um, but you hit on a very disturbing fact and disturbing trend, and that's the homelessness and the lack of opportunities for Black men in San Francisco. Now, when I drive around and I look, I see a whole lot of Black men, but I see people that are not Black that uh, in droves. But every time I I just get, because I've been seeing it for a long time. I see a pattern, and um, but I see a pattern. So in analyzing this, in the gentrification and the Black Lives Matters, the protest it's created a regional protest geography that in turn was met by regionalized repressive security state. So that would mean a regional political economy and its security regime. Did you hear about the young man um, who was shot? He was eating a burrito at Mission Dolores. His name was Nito. What's his first name?
Oh, that was a few years back. I remember
Yes, it
that.
was
Yeah.
Alex Nito. That was in 2015. And then the problem, what happened, according to this report that I'm reading from, it says here, let's go gentrification and police violence in San Francisco. In San Francisco, racialized policing has served to buttress meaning support gentrification, a process that inevitably leads to increased violence for many people of color at the hands of police. Of the many names associated with such violence in the recent years, well, we don't have a new report yet because of COVID, the numbers. So we know things are worse now, but back then, excuse me, that was in 2014. His death came as a symbol for many residents of the lethal violence of gentrification in the Bay Area. Alex Nito was shot and killed by the San Francisco Police Department as he ate a burrito on a park bench in Bernal Heights. That was March 2014, around 7 p.m. This man, he grew up in San Francisco. He was 28 years old, City College graduate, working as security guard. So he had a taser and he was there having a break. It says very clearly so he had a run-in with the police, and what it was, the first of these was with Evan Snow, 30-something-year-old white man who had moved to the neighborhood just 6 months earlier and who worked as a user design professional. His dog went after Nito's food. The two men yelled at each other. Soon thereafter, the couple, Tim Izzet and Justin Fritz, who had been living in the city for about a year, passed Nito, and Izzet then urged, Izzet testified that he saw Nito moving dangerously, nervously, and putting his hand on his taser. So Izzet urged his companion, Fritz, to call 911 to report Nito, telling the dispatcher that a Hispanic man in the park was pacing with a black handgun. 5 minutes later, 4 police officers appeared at the scene and shot 59 times at Nito, killing him on the spot. Mario Woods, they felt he was a threat. Why is it the report that I'm reading clearly states, I don't have to even ask the question because the research has been done. It clearly states that gentrification signifies not just the reinvestment of capital into urban spaces, but also a commitment to security forces which exert violence and spatial control. Spatial meaning control over space or occupancy of space upon poor racialized urban populations. So what are we saying here? We're saying as areas are gentrified, let's go back to the promise, Javon. You mentioned about when they come in, the builders come in, they promise certain things. And then these things don't happen. But meanwhile, the gentrification is taking place. And all of a sudden, the people that live there all the time, according to this report, are now outsiders.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's an issue in which that clearly police and gentrification go hand in hand in terms of essentially extincting people of color who've been in San Francisco, especially Black people. It is a means of borderline genocide. Look at people like me. Luckily, I've never had police call on me for something very serious.
Yes.
But I know people, some of my closest friends, who have had guns drawn at them just because of the color of their skin.
Yes.
It's dangerous out there, especially accusations from people who clearly have no means of, being from here. They're definitely outsiders, and they come into a space that essentially isn't theirs. It's very similar to, the occupation of native land. Like Christopher Columbus is very similar. A lot of parallels.
Discovered what?
Discovered land that wasn't yours. So,
right.
That's essentially what modern day gentrification is. It's the occupation of land that's already taken. So another way to put it.
Stated. Well stated it is. And this is, we just have a couple of minutes. I don't know where the time went. So another time, Javon, I want to thank you very much for helping, for participating with me and inviting me to participate in the discussion about Black history in San Francisco. It will take several episodes to cover everything, but I did want to talk about how Black men's lives are in danger just because they're Black, how brown men's lives are in danger just because they're brown. And and how the gentrification directly relates to Black Lives Matters, because Black Lives Matters means that we count as well. The gentrification brings in additional policing. It brings in people that call 911, that Karen, crazy Karen, white girl Karen, all that's a result of gentrification. People calling 911. So now I hear that we're calling 911 on Karen. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have to all get along. It's just one planet, and we must follow the Constitution. We must become legal. And I just want to thank you very much, Javon. We could go on and on. I'm gonna have to have you back for another episode. Thank you for showing me how to Zoom meetings. It's not bad. I kind of like it.
Once you start, you get used to it.
Yes. And I look forward to returning to the studio. We are on our COVID protocol, keeping everyone safe, and that's working out well for us. So we're glad to televise from home until it's safe.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Again,
all right. Well, that's what's going on right now. We have a lot more, but catch us on our next show. We'll see you Monday at 7:30. Thank you, Javon.
Thank you, Diane.
Take care. One love.
Of course. Have a great rest of your evening.
You too.